time. So I'll just go through very quickly some of the some background here in terms of actually I'm going to lower your image because it's blocking mine. So you can just give me a verbal time if I'll just a couple of minutes before the end.
Will do, no problem.
I won't see you. Thanks. So what I'm talking about here today and some research I've done, it's 2 large classes, so it's a combination. So it's about 120 and 200. Having said that, I have another class with 320 students, but I don't do group work in that class. So that's MCQ examined. So I've nearly 700 students a year. So I'm quite familiar with large classes and have been doing it for, you know, I said at least 15 years anyway. So I'm always looking for ways, practical tools, if you like, to help me manage these large classes. And it's getting worse in the sense that the resources I have are actually reducing. Sorry, I've lost that now. Oh yeah, so as I said, one class I have has about 50% international students, and this picks up on what some of the other speakers were saying about the mix and the ethnic mix and things like that. So how I go about choosing groups. They're both market research modules, and they have a strong applied learning focus with a group project. So the group project is actually essential. It's central to both of these modules, and most of the marks go for the group project. So they're both very applied modules, and the group learning is central to it. So again, I covered in the paper, in the literature, you know, some of the benefits of experiential learning. I don't think I need to go through all that here, but in particular, the benefits of group work. And from an employer's perspective, how, and it was mentioned again earlier, somebody mentioned that about, you know, how employers value group work and students learning those kind of soft skills during their college time. Interesting about the feedback, and this is picking up on Peter's point about friendship, and I actually think it's quite sad that, like 15 years ago or even 20 years ago, when I would say there's a group project, there'd be sort of a groan, you know, kind of, you know, around the classroom. But you could hear it; it was audible. And then I'd say, no, you know, group work, you learn a lot. Now, when I say there's group work, people kind of light up, and the feedback people are saying is, I got to make friends this year, you know, because our commerce students, there's 220 in first year, and I have a niece who's in commerce, and she's in 220 students, and I'm amazed. Like people are now actually saying the group work was one of the best things I did, you know, this year. You know, I got to meet people, we're still friends, and we socialized. And I think part of that came out of COVID as well. I started to see that change in attitudes to the group work. So that's fantastic, you know. And as previous speakers said, you know, if you can make a lifelong friend as well on my module, I'm delighted. Normally 4 to 5 students per team. I randomly assign, but I try to have an even mix of national and international students. I haven't time to go into it here, but this is causing some tension. I'm toying with ways. I liked what Peter was mentioning there, that research about different ways you might do it. I was thinking about something like that I would let students start gravitating towards making up their own groups once they get to know students, but I'll see. I'm very limited in resources and time. Group project, like I said, increasing student numbers, reduced tutorial support. You know, with the IRC funding now, our postgraduate, our PhD students have to do very little work for the department. So I'm working with about 50% less in terms of tutorial support than I had. I talked previously about the free rider last year and other group management issues, but what I'm talking about today will also address some of that. And grading feedback challenges, again, one of the things I'm trying to do is get rid of all paperwork in my modules. I do everything through Canvas, no paper. And again, I'm trying to promote self-directed learning, which is what I'm looking at here today. So I want to maintain a high standard of group work, enhance those personal learning, soft skills development, reduce group conflict, and leave students with a positive experience of group work. Because heretofore, you know, I found sometimes they might have had a bad experience in the previous module, and then they mightn't be so enthusiastic about it. Minimize administrative workload. We've heard that here again today. You know, with 700 students, I have a lot to do already. I don't want to bring anything more in myself. I'm all about using technology. Canvas, I live by Canvas. I'm actually doing research in UCC with the Centre for Digital Education on how to use, you know, Canvas more effectively for assessment, for learning, and so on. So I'm trying to maximize Canvas. And what I'm really looking at now is self-directed learning. Greater student engagement, but it has to be self-directed learning. So I'm giving the tools online. The students have to take responsibility for that learning. So again, all online, no paper. I don't like peer assessment. I never have. I know some of our externs don't like it, And I know there's research that doesn't favor it. That's not to say any of you who do peer assessment, there's huge benefits as well. And I'm sure there's ways of doing it that are very fair. But in my experience with such large classes where I couldn't really control it, I wasn't entirely comfortable with it. So I'm trying to find ways that don't necessarily involve peer assessment. And I don't like individual grading for group work because I think that sort of defeats one of the purposes of group work. Okay, so for me, the solutions, I talked last year about the group diary, which is working very well. The individual reflective journal, or it's a learning log, where students have to fill out. I've just reduced it to 2 entries now. Well, there's a couple of entries, but 2 times in the semester they have to do this, to record and reflect on their behavior in the group and how they might improve and what they're learning and the strengths that they're learning, just to get them thinking. And one of the things I've added now, with the help of the Skills Centre in UCC, is using Belbin. Now, I'm sure most of you are familiar with Belbin, the Team Roles Framework. And as you probably know, the Team Roles Framework was designed in order to create groups, so that you would have the necessary types in every group. So you'd have, a natural leader and an implementer and an ideas person. And I don't like the term Belbin use, a worker, because I think that it's a bit derogatory. But anyway, that's one of the terms they use. And so that would be the main function of Belbin. But what I'm using it here for is just for students to get greater awareness of their personality type while they're working in a group. So they do the Belbin self-assessment. Again, it's all through Canvas, no paperwork. I give them the tools on Canvas. I give them the self-assessment. It's done privately, so they don't share it with their group, so they can be honest. And the idea then is they reflect on their team role from Belbin. I don't mean in the project, but I mean from Belbin, excuse me, at the beginning of the project, and then again on completion of the project, to see, was Belbin accurate or not? Because it's one of the things I'm interested in researching. Is there any value in using this? I say to them at the start, I don't really believe in personality tests. You can't do a test in half an hour and be told that's your personality. It's to create awareness. So I say, not alone look at your role, but look at the other age roles in Belbin, and realize that those other people see the world that way. They legitimately see the world that way. They behave that way. And these are their strengths and weaknesses. And it's amazing the number of students who've said to me, if I get time, I'll show you some of the feedback. The number of students who've said to me, I never realized that other people see the world so differently. They weren't being aggressive. That's just their way of being enthusiastic or whatever, So it has proved to be very beneficial for the students, not alone to learn about themselves, but maybe even more importantly, to be aware of others' styles of behavior when working in groups. So the emphasis really is on increasing the personal awareness. And I stress the awareness element rather than the accuracy of Belbin. I actually say to them, look, even if you think this is nonsense, the very fact that you sat down for half an hour and thought about it, and thought about how other people see the world and behave differently, that in itself has a lot of value. So I don't use it for group composition, which would have been the main purpose of Belbin. So some of the outcomes, as I said, increased personal awareness to enhance group work activity. So obviously, if students are more aware of their behavior in a group, they're going to behave better, they're going to behave more effectively, they're going to understand other people's behavior that maybe they just thought was inappropriate or aggressive before. It certainly reduced the number of students coming to me for support. So I keep saying to them, you're taking responsibility for your own group, and this is self-directed learning. And I've no doubt at all that this is certainly what employers would like to hear. But actually, more than that, I think it's the personal learning is what I find very satisfying. When students say to me, I learned so much about myself this year doing this project. So again, as I said, taking greater responsibility. I minimize, it's come up again today about grading and things and workload. So I minimize the grading by doing honors pass fail. So basically you either applied the framework adequately, you met the word count, you demonstrated some reflection, you got an honor. You applied one of the maybe frameworks that was required, because they have to use a reflective writing framework as well. You applied maybe one of the frameworks and you didn't meet the word count and you didn't demonstrate huge reflective learning, but you made an effort, you passed or you failed. Basically, you didn't do it. 90%, 95% of the students get honors. And we were talking earlier about grading students for engagement and participation. Like, this is a written document they have to do. It's only 10% of the grade, but it actually really works. Very, very few students don't actually bother to do this at all. And the ones who don't do it are the ones who didn't sit the in-class exam or didn't participate in the project, and they were going to fail anyway. So just 10%, it's enough to get them to do it. I stress to them there are no wrong answers. So you're reflecting on how you see the world and what you learned, what you didn't learn, or what your behavior is. So you can't be wrong, you know. And I encourage them to be honest, because I said, I'm not grading according to you thinking you have to tell me you learned so much or you really improved. Students say to me, you know, they did very little. They're embarrassed. They should have done a lot more for the group project. They feel kind of guilty now. They were partying, but they still got 100% for the reflective journal because they use the reflection and they use the frameworks. But I explain all this very clearly at the start to the students. So I started doing some initial research on what I'd like to do with this in terms of to test how effective this is. Because I'm getting all this data in the journals, I'm thinking, wouldn't it be good to try and harvest some of that data and to try and support maybe, you know, what I'm saying, or maybe to find it isn't as good as I thought. So one of the things I want to do is a quantitative analysis, just the perceived accuracy of the Belbin self-assessment. Did the students actually think it was accurate? Now, I know this because they put it in their journals, but I want to harvest that data in a sort of aggregated way, anonymously. A quantitative analysis of the perceived accuracy of the Belbin role on completion of the project. A qualitative analysis of personal learning achieved in the course of undertaking the group project, and a qualitative analysis of personal learning associated with undertaking the Belbin analysis. So I already asked these questions in their journal. And for me now, the challenge is to see maybe the next iteration of this module or those modules to actually use that data for research. I actually collected quite a lot of the data, but I ran into an issue with our ethics committee because I was looking for retrospective approval to use the data, even though the students had signed a waiver and it's anonymous and everything. So I'm kind of dealing with that at the moment, but so I'm just going to present here very quickly, just 1 minute left, or of my time anyway. I don't know how I'm on the time. Just very quickly going to give you some, I'm calling it pilot data. So this is some data that I haven't put it in the paper for the reasons I mentioned, but this is what's coming out. So these are the responses of about 300 students. And one of the questions I asked them was, what do you think was the perceived accuracy of the Belbin analysis at the start of the project? So in other words, when they did the self-assessment test, are you an implementer? Are you a chairperson? Are you a worker? You know, are you whatever other role? There's 9 roles. And
2 minutes, Michael.
Yep. Okay. I'm just about 1 minute. So I was amazed the number of students who, you know, five is you know, medium. And, you know, you can see in the scale there, students were saying this was very accurate. Then at the end of the project, they were asked, now that you've done the project, thinking back on your Belbin role, do you think it's more or less accurate? And 5 would be about the same. So some think it's less accurate, but you can see quite a number more would think it's more accurate, and a number of those would think it's much more accurate, which I thought was interesting. And I'm just going to finish off now on just some comments I got, some themes that emerged. So quieter students regret not speaking up at group meetings earlier. So this was the qualitative analysis, content analysis of all these journals. And, you know, students were asked, you know, if you had to do the project again, what would you do differently now that you've reflected on your behavior throughout the project and your character and your Belbin analysis? So quieter students regret not speaking up at group meetings earlier. And maybe a bit like Connor's point in the first half, you know, about maybe you do need to ask students questions, you know, not to be afraid to share ideas, even if they're not going to be used later. So that fear of failure thing is very strong. I thought this was very interesting. The more confident students appreciating that quieter students are not just lazy or disinterested. So students wrote things like, I always assume people who don't speak up just don't care or don't give a damn, and I always end up having to do all the work. And they've realized that, you know, these people have a lot to say, but they're just shy, or, you know, again, maybe they need to be asked or whatever it is. Again, there was a lot around need to plan time better, undertake project work from the start, and so on. And many people did say the Belbin exercise created a greater awareness of others' working styles and also helped reflection on their own group behavior. And need to be more aware of how behavior might be coming across to others. And people even said things like, I just say verbally, I actually I haven't time now, but I had 1 or 2 slide there with some clips. But, you know, somebody even wrote something like, you know, looking back, I think I came across like a complete prick. Maybe this is something I need to address in the future, you know. So people would say they were bossy, they were dominant, and they realized, you know, that wasn't good for them, you know, and they need to reflect on this. Likewise, students thought they were shy. So overall, I'm very happy. I think it's a tool that is done online, doesn't take any of my time hardly. It's self-directed learning, and it just helps students with awareness, which I think is a great part of personal development, but then I think it's helping their academic progress as well. Thanks very much.